Now, so far in the forum, we've been exploring the theme of sustainable growth through partnerships between developed and developing countries. Now we want to look a little bit closer at how cities and city leaders can facilitate those kind of trade and investment links. So I'm very pleased to introduce you to the moderator of our first session today, Lauren Taylor. She is a presenter for Aljazeera English in London.
Hello and welcome to this rather large hall. I think still some people scoffing croissant out there, so they'll be in a minute, I should imagine. So I'm Lauren Taylor, one of the Aljazeera anchors based here in London. Just for background, I've been with the channel since it launched in 2006, and I spent the first 3 years in Doha in the Middle East before coming back here. And it's a great pleasure to join you and be able to introduce someone who I'm sure you'll feel you know well, the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, who in fact was instrumental in bringing you all here today, because he had this conference. He's the person who helped to bring this conference for the first time to a country which is not a Muslim country. I'm sure he'll tell you a bit about the background to that himself. Well, he and I have a few things in common. He went to a European school in Brussels, and I went to an international lycée in France. We both went to Oxford University, and we both love cycling, and we share the same hairdresser. No, that last bit I made up. But seriously, as mayor, he's had some huge successes, including, of course, the London Olympics, which were an amazing showcase for London and for sport, and an amazing also showcase for Paralympics. It raised the profile of that far more than ever before, I think. And he's the man, of course, behind the Boris bikes, which all you all know is the rental scheme that means you can hop on and off bikes across the city. He is hugely ambitious for London, and you'll know that he has big plans, including for a new airport for London. We'll have to see whether he can achieve that. But Boris Johnson has already shown that he's very good at bringing foreign investment into London with a £1 billion project to turn one of the Docklands areas into an Asian business port. And of course, part of the aim in bringing this conference here, this forum to London, is to try and encourage more investment from the Muslim world in London. And Islamic finance, as you know, is well established already in London with a number of Islamic licensed banks, and also actually a number of banks that offer Islamic banking services. And as you heard from the Prime Minister yesterday, the UK is planning to become the first Western country to issue an Islamic bond. Just to move on back on to Boris himself, he's a huge champion, of course, of culture, which is something that crosses borders too. In 2012, he commissioned a report into world culture in cities, which showed that culture is as important as finance and trade. And for instance, in London, more than 15 million visitors come here every year, and most of them say that access to culture is one of the big reasons that they come here. He's known, of course, for his colourful, hyperbolic language. He famously coined the phrase in the run-up to the Olympics, "The Geiger counter of Olympomania is going to zoink off the scale." So you're bound to be entertained. And last but not least, depending on who you read, he may be our Prime Minister one day. So do give him a big welcome. The format is that Boris will give a speech, a short speech, and then I'll ask him some questions, and we'll throw it open then to you in the audience for questions. So do welcome Boris Johnson.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Lauren, for that very generous, broadly accurate introduction. It's a great pleasure to see people streaming in anywhere, and I congratulate the faithful few who've made it this morning on getting here, because I imagine that most people at the WEEF were having a splendid evening last night in our city, and I'm very, very proud to be here this morning, because I think it's almost certain that I'm the first mayor of this city to be partly of Muslim extraction. Indeed, I'm the descendant, thank you for that small ripple of applause. I'm indeed the descendant of a Muslim entrepreneur, a businessman by the name of Ahmed Hamdi. He was my father's 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 father, a pious man of Anatolia who made the Hajj and who made his fortune by more or less cornering the market in beeswax in Istanbul, which was a very good idea to corner the market in beeswax, because you needed beeswax candles to light the mosques. And so he found himself in the same commercially agreeable position as the big six energy companies in Britain today, though obviously his prices were much more reasonable. And he flourished mightily, minding his own beeswax, as we say in England, until he was overwhelmed by a technological disaster when some American geezer invented the electric light bulb. And his son, my great-grandfather, had absolutely no choice but to abandon beeswax and become a controversial politician and journalist. Welcome, come on everybody. He's streaming in, these people. My great-grandfather took up politics and journalism, a terrible career move, and was eventually assassinated after a series of miscalculations. But he came here to London shortly before he was assassinated, a few years, almost exactly 100 years ago. My great-grandfather came here to London. One thing led to another, and he left behind my grandfather. And that man, my great-grandfather, also grew up a Muslim and knew the Quran off by heart, folks. He did. I'm afraid I don't, but he jolly well did. And I think he would have been absolutely stunned to find that his descendant had gone on to become mayor of this city. Don't you think? I think you'd have absolutely amazed. Not as stunned as the people of London were, by the way, in 2008, when they woke up that fine morning and found that I'd succeeded. But I think he would have been even more amazed to find that the world had so progressed and that things had changed so much in our relations with the Muslim world that we are today welcoming the world's first World Islamic Economic Forum to take place outside the Muslim world here in London. It's a fantastic thing. And I think he would have been very, very impressed by the ninth weef, as it's called. A word, by the way, that defeats my Windows spell checker. I don't know if you try to type in weef. Every time you type in weef, it comes out wife. Have you noticed that? My Muslim ancestors occasionally had more than one wife, but 9 was unthinkable, I want you to know. So I want to thank everybody behind the ninth weef for choosing London. I particularly want to thank, of course, the Tun Musa, the Malaysian government for everything that they have done, and also, of course, my Deputy Mayor, Sir Edward Lister, who's really been right behind this thing for a very long time and worked on so many of the arrangements. And we in City Hall have been absolutely determined to bring you all here because this event comes at a time of partnership, economic cooperation, partnership between London and the Muslim world on a scale we have never seen before. And I applaud very much what the Prime Minister had to say yesterday in launching the first £200 million Sharia-compliant bond here in London. Fantastic. I agree 100% with what he said about making mortgages and student loans more accessible and making them Sharia compliant. That's pure common sense, isn't it? And today we are also announcing our support in London for a £100 million fund to encourage tech startups from the Muslim world to come to this country and to this city. And by the way, in the last 4 or 5 years since I've been mayor, and really no thanks to me, I'm afraid to say, we have seen the most astonishing flourishing of tech in London. We now employ about 40,000 people in that sector. I see distinguished representatives of the industry there in the front row. We lead Europe. And by the admission of Mayor Bloomberg of New York himself, we lead the world now in this sector. We have fintech, biotech, nanotech, medtech, edtech, and tech. We have every manner of tech that you could desire. And you will find, when these firms come, as I hope that they will, in ever-growing numbers to our city, they will find obviously all sorts of fantastic amenities, wonderful restaurants, more Michelin-starred restaurants, I'm told, than Paris, a statistic that I have not troubled to investigate myself, but if I'm wrong, I'm prepared to go to Paris to apologize. But a city that's being transformed, as the Prime Minister mentioned yesterday, by stupendous investments in transport, in infrastructure, in improving the look and feel of London. Lauren was kind enough just now to mention the bicycles. Thank you, Lauren. I hope some of you had a chance to use those wonderful, beautiful, banker-funded bicycles, or actually those bicycles, by the way, now I come to think of it, are financed by Barclays, in which, unless I miss my guess, Barclays has a big Middle Eastern shareholder, as far as I can remember. So they are just one example of developments in our city that turn out not just to be financed by investors from the Muslim world, but very often, actually, the funding methods turn out to be Sharia compliant. It's absolutely amazing. I think Londoners have been stunned to discover this. And I hope very much that some of you have had the chance in the last day or so to use the Emirates airline. Anybody use that wonderful cable car? It's really called the Emirates airline, but it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The only piece of transport infrastructure in our city which is going to cover both its capital and revenue costs over the next 6 years. I mean, you certainly couldn't say that of HS2. It's an absolutely wonderful project. If you haven't been on the cable car, the Emirates airline, you will certainly have seen the Shard, the only building in the world that looks as though it's actually emerging through the skin of the earth, like the tip of a gigantic cocktail stick erupting through the integuments of a gigantic pickled onion. You cannot have missed what is going on at Battersea, which I think, the Emirates airline, of course, from the Emirates, the clue's in the name. The Shard, financed very largely by Qatari investments. Battersea, transforming that old ruin that's mouldered away for most of our lifetimes. Welcome, everybody. People are still drifting in. It's obviously a very heavy night last night. I do congratulate the WEEF organisation for laying on what was clearly a splendid banquet. That fantastic project at Battersea is transforming what was once a power station, a ruin, fit for nothing but the cover of a Pink Floyd album, into the most fabulous, fabulous new district with thousands of homes, thousands of jobs, hotels, restaurants, businesses, you name it. And folks, look at this very space in which we are sitting. This Excel Centre was actually the home of more Olympic events, I believe, and I should know this because I helped to put the thing on. I think more Olympic events than any other venue in the whole of London. Am I not right, Eddie? I think I am. And that was of fantastic importance for our city, and made possible, obviously, by investment from Abu Dhabi. And I think those Olympics actually were very, very important in helping to attract people to London, make them want to come and invest here. Because if people saw this city on their screens, they saw the amazing contrast between beautiful new buildings and glorious ancient architecture. They saw young, happy, diverse, thrusting, multicultural, multinational type of population. And I think they decided to get themselves here. And I think they were totally right to do so. Don't you? Good. Because here in London, we have many things going for us. We have the right time zone, we have the right language, we have the rule of law, which is very, very important for international investors. We are so faithful and punctilious in enforcing the law that we actually lock up our MPs if they try to pass their speeding points to their wives. And the police patrol our city in such a spirit of strict impartiality that they actually, I think, recently arrested the son of the reigning monarch, who happened to be loitering in the shrubbery of Buckingham Palace, which shows the scrupulousness with which we do these things. We have a glorious, unfettered and uninhibited free press, which I hope very much that we will preserve. And above all, we are open. London is open to people of talent, people of imagination, people who want to trade, people who want to do business from all cultures and all backgrounds. And you can see that. You can see how that effect manifests itself on the streets of London. And I'm not just talking about the shisha bars up the Edgware Road. I'm talking about the whole thing, the cultural impact that the city makes on people who come here, the fantastic festivals that we put on. And of course, there will be loads of people who say, well, you know, we should be less open and less welcoming of other cultures. And I would point out to you, in conclusion, that it's that openness that has been the secret of London's success down the ages. And, you know, this hasn't always been a successful city. That's a terrible truth. I mean, let me ask you, here at this World Islamic Economic Forum, if anybody can tell me which was the most populous and most powerful city in the late 8th century AD, in about 800 AD, which was the most, on Earth, which was the city that had the biggest population and the biggest output of all, on the whole planet? Anybody know the answer? You should. Well, it wasn't Rome. Rome was in a bad way. It wasn't Athens. Athens was even worse. It wasn't Byzantium. Byzantium had shrunk to about maybe a population of 40,000. Things had gone terribly wrong for Byzantium. Which was the most popular city? And come on, not Paris. Paris was a few huddle of mud huts. No, Byzantium and Istanbul are the same place. They were going, come on. Cordoba, no, very close, but right idea. Baghdad, thank you, sir. It was Baghdad, wasn't it? Baghdad was at the court of Harun al-Rashid, of course it was. And it was a city whose impact and whose culture was felt around the world. And London, I'm afraid to say at that stage, was a bit of a dump. It was a ruin, and all the Roman mosaics had been more or less destroyed by ficus trees growing up through them, and there were animals kept in the wreckage of the hypercaustes, and it was a fire-blackened ruin, London. And yet, there was a ruler of that ruin. There was a man, a Saxon, speaking a weird kind of German, who wanted to put his country and his city back on its feet. He was an ambitious man. Anybody know his name? The guy who ruled London in about the late 700s. Not Alfred came a bit later on. You're very, very close. It was the guy more or less just before Alfred. It was a guy called Offa, King Offa of Mercia, who was famous for his dike, you will recall. And if you go to the British Museum, the greatest museum on earth, which I hope that you will, and I seriously recommend that you do this, ask to see the astonishing gold dinar. The gold dinar struck by Offa, the ruler of London, in 790 AD. Because it's got his name on one side. Do you know this? It's got his name on one side, Offa Rex, and on the other hand, what is he on the other side of the coin? What has he written? Do you know this? He wrote the Shahada. That's what he wrote. Isn't that an amazing thing? And why did he do that? Why did his Arabic script wasn't much good, Offa, I'm afraid, but it's absolutely plain what he was writing. He wrote that on that coin, which he minted here in London, because he knew that his people would flourish by trade with the Muslim world. And of course, it was the Muslim world that then dominated commerce in the Mediterranean. And indeed, it was that Muslim world in that period of the Middle Ages that preserved so many of the glories of antiquity, of Western civilization. Aristotle, Euclid, you name it. We would not have those treasures today if it had not been for medieval Muslim scholars. So I want to conclude this speech very, very simply, folks, and I want to renew the offer of Offa. Offa's offer I make again. Very, very simple. Let's build up trade, let's build up cooperation, let's build up partnership, and let's do it in a city that has risen very considerably, in my view, since the days of Offa, to become, in my admittedly biased opinion, unquestionably the greatest city on earth, with more American banks here in London than there are in New York itself, more museums than Paris, less rainfall than Rome, and what I hope and believe will be the greatest center for Islamic finance outside the Muslim world. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for choosing London. Thank you for coming along this morning, and I hope very much that you enjoy your forum and the rest of the business today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Okay, Lauren.
So, I want to pick up on the Islamic finance
Yes.
bit. How do you see Islamic finance as fitting into London life?
Well, I think that it's very, very important that London should be very strong in Islamic finance, and clearly it's something that is going to be of huge benefit to people who need to have as I was saying just now, a Sharia-compliant mortgage or Sharia-compliant loan. But above all, it enables us to go ahead with the financing of quite stupendous projects, such as the ones that I mentioned. I think that you could look at Chelsea Barracks, you could look at other projects around London which have Sharia-compliant financing behind them. So it's a fantastic opportunity. This is a market, I think, that is going to grow exponentially, and it is plain that it's currently only achieving about 2% of its global potential. I think that London has always been at the forefront of financial services. We're still the biggest financial centre in the world. I think we have more people in financial services broadly understood even than New York, and we want to be in the business of this kind of stuff, and I think it's the right place to be.
It is 5 years on, roughly, since the start of the global financial crisis. Do you feel that enough has changed in the way the finances of the city and the finances world generally functions to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen again, especially when you've got new investors coming in and starting Islamic finances? Can people be confident that all the regulation is right?
I think that they can certainly be confident that a huge amount has been done to make sure that the banks have the right capital adequacy and that they're properly capitalized and that they're properly regulated. And it is clear that since 2008 there is a very new climate in finance in the world generally, and everybody understands that the mistakes of the whole subprime epoch cannot be repeated. The interesting thing about Islamic finance, to me, is whether or not it could be said to be a possible protection against that sort of unnecessary risk-taking, founded as it is on these very strict constructions of having an asset rather than allowing money endlessly to create money, as it were, as Aristotle warned against, by the way.
And do you think you've mentioned the big sort of investments in big projects. Do you think ordinary London people, maybe who are not Muslims, will benefit from having access to this?
Yeah, I mean, this is part and parcel of allowing us to get ahead with projects in our city that would otherwise not go ahead, and it enables us to build tens of thousands of homes, which will be massively to the benefit of people of all income groups in London. So I don't think there's anything to worry about, anything to be apprehensive about. I think it's a great thing.
And you've talked about the openness of offer and renewing offers offer.
Yeah.
How difficult is it at the moment to bring people in? I mean, what's the immigration kind of restriction in London that you face? And is there anything you can do about that to try and make things easier for people who are kind of moving across or investing?
Well, we have some. It's one of the biggest issues that people raise with me. People do want to be able to come swiftly and easily to London to do business, and we do try to be as accommodating as possible. And the Home Office has actually made, I think, huge strides in improving the situation, in being more open. Clearly, there are and trying to accelerate intercompany transfers and all the things that we want to see. Plainly, what I do not want to see is loads of people coming illegally and exploiting the system, and that's only fair. I don't want to see people coming and making a mockery of those who have worked very hard to get here and who have done the right thing. But be in no doubt, if people want to come here to do business, we are absolutely open, and we will make sure that we help you in any way that we can.
Recently there was this business of sending vans around saying illegal immigrants go home, and that somewhat backfired. Are you confident that essentially that the policies
Lauren,
are being got right?
I'd be absolutely clear about this. There was a problem of illegal immigration, And it's very serious because that undermines people's confidence in the system, and it undermines the credentials of those who are here legally. And I think it's perfectly reasonable, actually, to say to people who are here illegally, I say, do you need any help going home? Here's a number you can ring. Dial us up, and we'll put you on a plane. I don't actually have as much of a problem with that as some other people. But I do want to defend our city as a great open cosmopolis that welcomes people of talent and people who want to make their lives here and to contribute.
And as part of that, how critical is integration, or the concept of integration? Is that something that needs to work in London?
I do believe in integration. I believe that you've got to speak English. I hope that's not too controversial a point of view. I think that it's the language of business, it's the language of air traffic control, usefully. It's, what else? Language of, I was going to say it's the language of love, but that might not be. It's the international language, and I want everybody in our city to have that basic economic tool. It's not fair on people who are living in this city who actually may have been here for quite some time. And I'm thinking actually particularly of the female population in some communities, some areas, if they cannot use that basic economic tool and participate in London life in the way that they should.
On that matter, I mean, there was recently a bit of controversy around wearing the face veil in schools. And
yeah. Look, I mean, I've got a very clear view about this. I think that the face, when you actually cover the whole face, is my view. And when you're compelled to cover your whole face, I think that is something that makes instruction difficult. It's pedagogically, in my view, not a good idea. I have tried to be a teacher. It's very difficult being a teacher because they don't pay any attention, and you need to focus on them very hard. And I think it's important to be able to register the impact that you're having, to be able to communicate properly with your kids, and to see how they're responding. So I actually think it's perfectly right for schools to resist having a face covering in the class.
Just on the matter of schools, I mean, obviously education is a big part of, when we loosely had the theme of smart cities for this session,
yes.
Didn't we? So smart can mean a number of things. You came back from China recently and were saying that you thought Mandarin should be taught in schools.
It's taught by, it's not taught enough, though.
Yeah.
It's not taught, it isn't on offer as regularly as I would like. And Arabic, for instance, it seems to me another language that we should be learning more often. And I've actually set up a mayor's prize for the best performance in Arabic by a London school person, pupil. With the details yet to be worked out. Funding yet to be fully established, but it will be a wonderful thing to compete for.
And more generally, obviously, with the city, you've obviously just been in China. Yeah. I wondered whether you came back thinking, wow, they've got this in their infrastructure that we haven't got. What did you come back with? Yes, I did.
I thought it was absolutely shameful. When I was in China, I took a train that went 813 miles at a speed of, it could have gone about 400 kilometers an hour. It went about 300 and something, actually, just because it was decided to slow down. And it had stations that you could eat your breakfast off, huge, great big glorious marble concourses. And guess how long it took the Chinese to build that whole thing? 813 miles worth of high-speed train, 2 years. 2 years. And that, which is about as long as it would take us to do an environmental impact assessment, or absolutely, and they're about to. I went to the Hong Kong airport, which you may be you'll know that the Chek Lap Kok airport, and a fantastic thing that they built using reclaimed land. How long did it take the Hong Kong Chinese to do that? 5 years. Okay, the whole thing. And it would probably take 5 years doing an equalities impact assessment in London. So we need to speed up. We need to get a grip on our infrastructure. And I think the current pace is, and I think it's completely wrong, by the way, that some political parties, naming no names, are trying to play games with important projects like HS2.
But with things like your idea is to have a whole new airport for London, but that,
Yeah.
with that, your own political party isn't particularly happy with some of your ideas, are they? So
Well, and they've got to pull their finger out. I mean, absolutely right.
So how far off is your idea, do you think, now?
I genuinely think that we're missing the boat on this, or the plane rather, because what is happening is that business people from the UK cannot get to some of the big growth destinations of Asia and indeed Latin America in the way that they can from Germany, from France, from Holland and Spain, even Helsinki. And all those places are building new runways whilst we are completely incapable, fossilized, frozen, motionless, unable to expand our aviation capacity in the southeast of England. And we must get on with it. And I think that Heathrow, unfortunately, is in the wrong place for continual expansion, and you've got to do a new four-runway airport elsewhere. So I'm very confident that the iron logic of my position will lead eventually to success. But it is hard to, at the moment, it's like wading through treacle.
And if you can't push that through, do you have a plan B that would mean that you could sort of have some of the congestion removed? And is there something that you would think is a second option other than a whole new airport?
I think that the advantages of the hub are very great, Lauren. If you don't have a hub, then you can't generate the number of the extra destinations that we're seeing put on in other European countries, and indeed in Dubai, for heaven's sake. And people are going to start hubbing in Dubai when they could be coming to London. That is going to be an economic disbenefit to our city. They're hubbing. Huge numbers of flights are going to Schiphol when they could be coming to London. So we need to challenge that, and we need to do what our Victorian ancestors would have done and build a genuine 24-hour hub airport.
And in terms of this is obviously a big city, and you kind of have been to lots of other big cities. If you were advising people on, say, big sporting events, I mean, you've had a successful Olympics here. If you had to advise someone else on an Olympics project, what would you say the biggest thing is? Because obviously, in London initially there were a few question marks over security. You had to bring in the army and so on. But in the end, it worked out.
Everybody turned up. I think G4S are doing a great job here today, aren't they? They seem to be here in strength. I would say the most important thing, if your country is doing something like that, if you're running a colossal international sporting event, the most important thing is not to give in to despair, and not to listen to the because there'll be lots of people who try to knock you, and lots of people who try to foment a climate of gloom.
In fact, I was wondering, because since then there have been a few obviously big sporting events in London, and we've had one person saying that essentially they are, vanity projects for you, and everyone is inconvenience. For instance, he was talking about the big triathlon event that happened recently. This was one quote. Do you think sometimes you get it wrong,
No.
And people no?
Well, I mean, I think these people are entirely miserabilist. They objected to the Olympics. Those are the very people who were routed over the Olympics. They were proved completely wrong, and they not only saw us put on a spectacular Olympic and Paralympic Games, they have also seen since the Olympics that those games have been a spectacular investment, a spectacular advertisement for London. And since the Games last year, as I said just now in my speech, we have seen stupendous sums of investment coming to our city.
And so sport is a big part of that.
Of course, it's a big part of that. And all the events that they moan about are perfectly wonderful, and they should put a sock in it. And that's my view. Well, obviously we will, perhaps sometimes we could do better about notifying them when the roads are going to be closed. And I've read the Riot Act to people about that. There are bits and pieces we can improve. But broadly speaking, these things are fantastic for the city.
Well, I certainly enjoy triathlon, and I was remembering one time swimming in the docks here as part of a London triathlon, which is, when I see them now, I think, how on earth did I ever do that? It was a silly idea.
Did you wear a wetsuit?
Yeah.
Right.
I look at it now and think, whoa.
Was that because I know I see people swimming? As I was using the Emirates airline, name check. I looked over and saw kids swimming, without wetsuits. I mean, I thought they must have been absolutely out of their minds, but they obviously like it.
Just a few more questions, and then I'll throw it open to our good people here in the hall. On the role of the leadership of the city, I mean, obviously I mentioned that you're quite hyperbolic and a sort of have a lot of that sort of, language that people associate with you as being not someone who's a boring politician.
Yeah.
How important would you say it is for a mayor to be someone who's more colourful than a normal politician, if you like?
Well, I think it's totally irrelevant. The job of the mayor is to deliver better services and better value for the people of the city, and that's what we've done. We've cut the council tax. We've massively reduced crime. We're investing in huge quantities of affordable housing. That's what people really. I mean, that's how you get re-elected. You can blather away all you like, but in the end, people are gonna notice what's different and what's improved. So, I mean, yes, there's an important job to talk things up and to explain what's going on, but it's about delivery of services.
And at the moment, is security more of an issue after the events that happened in Kenya recently, and those kind of style of attacks, the Mumbai or Kenya style attacks? Is that something that you've had to revisit? Big scale security within Central London?
I think it would be fair to say that we are continually on the alert, Lauren. I mean, we think there are, a sizable but not, huge number of people who are potential risks to our city and our society. And clearly, there is a massive amount of work that goes on the whole time by the security services to monitor them, and that is what we do. And so far, thank goodness, they've done a pretty good job of keeping us safe. But you can never, ever be complacent, and it's something that clearly we think about a great deal.
Okay, right. I'm going to throw it open to you on the floor there. Just on one housekeeping point, I think maybe Marianne mentioned it earlier, there are fixed mic positions. I think where people are going to, I was told they were going to stand with paddles near the fixed. There we are. Okay, so we have various people standing with numbers near the microphones. So if you have a question, do head across to a microphone and we will be able to hear you in that way. Any hands up at all?
I think we probably covered it. I mean, are there in fact any questions at all? There's a chap here.
There's a chap there. Yeah?
Hi there, Boris.
Morning.
My name's Imran, a proud Scotsman and a very proud Londoner. You very recently put your full support behind the very first Halal Food Festival, which indeed happened a month ago in this very venue. How important is halal food to London and indeed to our relationships with the Islamic world?
Well, I'm delighted to have supported the Halal Food Festival, and plainly, if halal food is of vital nutritional significance, because without it, people who observe halal will not be alive. So, I'm a keen. I'm very, very happy to have supported it, and I hope it's properly promoted and properly labelled and all the rest of it.
And like your ancestors, do you eat halal food?
I have to tell you, I'm not an observer of any such code. Insofar as I do eat, I probably do. I'm delicious, but it's entirely accidental.
You should try more often.
Okay. Well, you're kind.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Hang on. It's hard to see with the lights here. There we are. But number 3 there. Yeah.
Hi, Boris. I just wanted to kind of talk a bit about Islamic finance. It's amazing that we have this vision to bring it into the UK.
Yeah.
But after speaking to a few people within the field, what I found out was that to be able to get there, the means itself seems to be impermissible. So you need to go through conventional banking to actually have the skill sets to work within Islamic finance.
Yeah.
So are there any projects perhaps set up for students to be able to work within Islamic finance? That's part A to the question. And the second part, after David Cameron's announcement on halal student loans, is there anything that's going to be in place for students that have already taken the loan now on the £9,000 tuition fees to be able to actually convert
retrospectively?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm afraid is the answer to the second point. I don't see any particular reason why it should be technically difficult. There are lots. I think there are lots of banks and financial institutions in London which have a great deal of expertise in this matter already. I'm very keen to encourage it. It seems to me that there is a natural market growing, and that the smart thing for students to do is to get online and try and work out how this how this thing works. And conceptually, I think it is quite, I agree with you, I think it is technically quite difficult. And I think it would certainly be to the advantage of the financial institutions themselves to spend a bit of money on educating their intake, educating graduates in how this stuff actually works. As I try to get my head around it, and I must say I found some of the concepts of, you know, it's a bit tricky, isn't it? The idea that there's no interest at all, and the idea that it's such a charge, not an interest payment. You know, it needs, but when it comes to derivatives or whatever, if you're going to have a halal derivative, I can imagine that's. I mean, have we got halal derivatives yet? We have. Well, okay. There's lots of brilliant technicians who are working on this stuff, and I congratulate them. I would like to see that kind of knowledge disseminated more widely, and naturally, I would expect that to be done in the business schools, and supported by business themselves, supported by the financial sector.
Thank you.
Question number 2 there.
Yeah, morning, Boris.
Morning.
You seem to be a very strong promoter of electric cars
Yes.
in London. Recent reports in the press seem to not getting traction as compared to other cities in Europe. In your opinion, what's stopping London to be the hub of electric car
Well, I don't know.
utilization? Is it a policy thing, or is it customers are not warming up to EVs?
Well, we've got about 3,000 EVs in London, and we've put in quite a big network of charging points. I think the last figures I saw, so we had more EVs than any other city in Europe. So I'm slightly surprised by what you say. I think there is a general. They have an Autolibre system in Paris where they're trying them out, and our problem with that is that at the moment, which is like the only other city that's really invested a lot in them, the trouble with the Autolibre system is that it's not clear to us that you're really taking cars off the road. What seems to be happening in Paris is that commuters, passengers who might be using mass transit or might be using bicycles or might even be walking are using the Autolibre system instead, rather than actually relieving congestion in the form of taking cars off the road. So we're very, you know, we're conducting a trial in Paris, and we're seeing how it goes. But at the moment, we're not yet persuaded that it's the right way forward. And the general point is that what is certainly true is that the market is not yet mature, and that's because the vehicles are still, in my view, slightly too expensive. The cost needs to come down. But there's another problem, which is that people suffer from this thing called range anxiety. Which is like status anxiety, except you're worried that you're going to conk out. Your EV will run out, and you'll have an embarrassing situation. I think that is overdone, that range anxiety. We've put in lots of charging points to conquer it, and I think the future is going to be electric. We are putting in, we're trialing now a series of electric buses, and I've said that from 2020, the whole of the centre of London will be an ultra-low emission zone. So if you want to come into the centre of London from 2020 onwards in a new vehicle, you will have to have a plug-in hybrid. You'll have to have a hybrid with a range extender, or an EV, and that will, I think, will drive the market very considerably. That will I think, force the manufacturers to start to extend the range of products that they're offering.
Right, I think there's a question at number 1 over there, lady here.
Hi, on high-speed rail, there's been a lot of negative press about it lately and a very well-organised no lobby. What do you think could be done to improve the pro-high-speed 2 lobby and get the message out to the general public about its benefits in a way that's relevant to them?
I think we've got to get firmly behind this, and we in London, we need it to work for London. So we need a proper regeneration of Euston, we need mitigation in West London, we need all sorts of things to make it really work for the city. But those can be done, and I think the government will do them. But overall, you get away from the argument that this is about high speed. I think it was a misnomer. The most important thing is that it is giving our country the extra capacity that it needs on the rail. And the most astonishing thing about Britain, and indeed about London, is the way the population is growing. It is unlike virtually any other West European democracy. The population has grown hugely just since I've been mayor. On current projections, this country is likely to be the most populous country in Europe by the end of the century. We are going to need better mass transit systems. We're going to need high-speed rail to cope with demand. It will be a fantastic thing for London. I think we should get behind it, and we should make the case. Don't forget, everybody, the Treasury, who are basically opposed to HS2 but won't admit it, the Treasury were against the M25, for heaven's sake, let alone Crossrail, which is going to be an absolutely wonderful scheme for our city. If you listen to the money men of the Treasury, you'd never get anything like that built. It's got to be done. It's essential for our country. Every other country in Europe has gone that route. Otherwise, we're simply going to have to build more motorways, and you know, that will be even more politically difficult.
I think there's a question here at number 2, this lady here.
You mentioned security and also press freedom. I wonder if you agree with David Cameron that some of the Guardian's revelations have made it harder to keep Londoners safe, or not?
I think there's a very difficult balance, and insofar as the answer is I don't know about the actual risks that the Guardian's coverage have occasioned. I personally defend the Guardian's right to publish interesting information, such as that Angela Merkel's phone was bugged by Barack Obama. I think that is an interesting fact. I want to know that.
Have you changed your mobile lately?
No, I'm sure my mobile's being bugged by everybody. You know, good luck to them. But I think the public deserves to know that. I think do you not think so? Or do you think we should hush that sort of thing up? I think the world is better. The world is better for government being kept under the beady-eyed scrutiny of the media, and for salient and interesting facts about espionage being occasionally brought into the public domain. Now, there are, and I don't believe for a second that fact that Angela Merkel's phone was bugged by the Americans, by the NSA, it does anything to jeopardize anybody's security. It's merely colossally embarrassing and interesting, and it should come out. Now, there are things that every editor, and I was once an editor, is familiar with the D-notice system in this country, which is that if the security services think you are about to publish information that they think is damaging to the interests of this country or of security, then they will come to you and they'll ring you up and they'll tell you, and every editor obeys that. Everybody spikes stuff that they are informed under the D-notice system would be damaging to security. So I'm sure that the Guardian would have obeyed that as well. But you know, if they've gone beyond what was sensible in what they've published, then plainly that was wrong. But as far as I can see, it was useful to know.
I think we'll take another question over there, number 3.
Good morning, Boris. My name's Omar, member of your party, but I got to tell you that I'm an MCB delegate today.
Morning.
Good morning. Just wanted to pick up on some of the things that you sort of mentioned. In terms of, you made the comment that the Chinese are able to build things faster and deliver on time because they don't have equalities impact assessments and so forth. So taking that line of thought, do you think for the HS2 we should be employing the Chinese? And also,
no.
in terms of your own Boris factor, do you think if we had a Johnson Prime Minister, more business and Islamic finance would come to London necessarily?
Well,
thanks.
I don't think we should. Thank you. I don't think we should necessarily be employing the Chinese just to get it done fast. Though I've got nothing against Chinese collaboration, and indeed I welcome it. I welcome any kind of international trade and collaboration. What I think we need to have is a slightly more robust and dynamic approach to some of these planning questions, and not allow ourselves to be endlessly bogged down in impact assessments and judicial reviews and heaven knows what, which go on and on for 20 years. So that's the approach we should adopt. And on your second point, that is a hypothesis that I do not contemplate. And in any case, I'm very proud that under this mayoralty, we've been able to bring the 9th WEEF to London, and I hope you're enjoying it.
And just on that leadership question, because obviously you're here, do you want to be the next Prime Minister? It'd be a shame not to ask you.
Thank you, Lauren. What I want to do is get on and complete my term as mayor of the greatest city on earth, with great respect to all the other cities represented here, and to continue to attract investment, particularly from the Muslim world, to London, and indeed to build up trade and cooperation. It's an exhausting but beautiful and brilliant and wonderful job to do, and I want to give it my best shot for 2 and a bit years, more than a half, which is a very long time in politics.
I think we may, I'm not sure who's keeping an eye on the time. Have we got time for another couple of questions?
The thing on that over there says naught, naught,
It
naught,
does,
naught.
doesn't it, rather alarmingly?
I think that means that
Okay.
there's probably someone who wants us to shut up. But
Well, let's take one more for luck, and this chap over here, number 3.
Yeah, it seems like lots of the new property developments in London being purchased by overseas investors who are not necessarily coming to London that frequently. What do you think the effect of that is in London? And
Yeah.
do you think that a mansion tax on high-value property is a good idea?
No, I don't think that's a good idea at all. And I mean, you're raising a very interesting question, because there's a lot of anxiety at the moment. There's no question that people are worried that homes in London are being bought off plan abroad, and that they are not therefore capable of being used by Londoners. And actually, I do think that those fears are overdone. Currently, only 6% of London properties are going to overseas investors. You look at the whole of Greater London, which is about the level you saw in 1990. And if you didn't have that, as I said right at the beginning, if you didn't have that level of confidence in London, that overseas investment, then we would not be able to build thousands, tens of thousands of homes that are now coming on stream for Londoners, for rent, for affordable rent, for part-by-part rent, and for sale. So I don't think this is a zero-sum game. I think it's win-win, and London is the better for being able to attract foreign investment.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry we haven't got time for any more questions, but that was a great
Thank you
to have
very
you
much.
talking to us, and thank you
Lauren.
all in the audience for
Thank you
attending
very
this
much.
morning.
Thank you.